first grade, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day that you are watching this video. If you are in Miss Kelly's class or Miss Finney's class, then you are in the right spot because it's time for reading. Let's get right into our materials for today. You probably already guessed it. Today you'll need your brain, a pencil, and a piece of paper. If you need to pause the video to go grab a piece of paper and your pencil, go ahead and do that now. Great job, first grade. Now that you have your materials for today, let's get right into what we're learning for today. Today we're going to be reading a story and we're going to listen extra close for the key details in the story. You guys have practiced with key details so much throughout the year, so this should be extra fun. Good readers always use that text evidence from the book whenever we're talking about what happened in the story. Let's take a closer look of what we're going to look at in our story today. Okay, first grade, if you look up right there, that's our story for today. Today we're going to be reading The Wind and the Sun. It's a really special story, so I'm excited to get right into it. Before we get into our story though, we're going to be thinking about and listening close for what happens at the beginning of our story. We're going to listen close and see what happens in the middle of our story. And we're also going to think closely of what happens at the end of our story. I really want you guys to listen extra close for what happens at the end of the story. Still be listening to the rest of the story, but I really want you to listen extra close to what happens at the end of the story. All right, friends, let's get right into The Wind and the Sun. Can I get a drum roll for our story? Drum roll, drum roll, drum roll. All right, let's get right into our story.
The Wind and the Sun. Retold by Brenda Parks. Illustrated by Joanna Chernychowska.
One day, the wind and the sun were arguing about who was the strongest. "Look at me," boasted the wind. "I can blow clouds across the sky. I can toss cars and houses high. I can blow windmills round and round. I can blow trees out of the ground."
"That's nothing,"
replied the sun.
"My heat is the strongest by far. My heat can melt ice. My heat can melt tar. My heat can dry rivers. My heat can dry land. Watch me melt the ice cream in these children's hands."
Back and forth argued wind and sun. Then they noticed a traveler walking down the road. "I have an idea," said Wind. "Whichever of us can make the traveler take off his cloak shall be recognized as the strongest." "I will go first," Sun agreed, and hid behind a cloud to watch. Wind began to blow little gusts. The traveler wrapped his cloak tightly across himself. Harder and harder the wind blew. Whoosh! 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 The traveler wrapped his cloak more tightly across himself. The wind blew harder still. The harder the wind blew, the more tightly the traveler wrapped his cloak around himself. Whoosh! 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 Finally, the wind gave up in despair. The sun came out from behind the cloud. First, it began to shine lightly on the traveler. The traveler turned his face to the sun. Then he smiled as he enjoyed the warmth. The sun shone more strongly. The traveler mopped his brow. Stronger and stronger and stronger the sun shone. The traveler opened his cloak. Still, the sun shone stronger and stronger. The traveler grew hotter and hotter and hotter. After a few more steps, the traveler loosened his cloak. Then he tore off his cloak and dropped it on the road. "You win," said Wind. "I am sorry I was so boastful,"
Remember, Wind,
said Sun.
strength can be used in different ways on different days.
"I understand now, Sun," said Wind. "The better course is to use persuasion, not force."
Whew, that was such an interesting story, first grade. Now, I'm going to be talking about what happened at the beginning of the story and the middle of the story, and I want you to think to yourself what happened at the end of the story. Watch how Miss Finney uses her text evidence to help her know what happened at the beginning and middle of the story. So friends, I'm thinking about what happened at the beginning of the story. What happened first? Well, I know that at the beginning of the story, the wind and the sun were arguing about who was the strongest. I know that that's true because if I look at my text on that second page, it says, one day the wind and the sun were arguing about who was the strongest. Right in my text, it tells me what happened at the beginning of the story. So at the beginning of the story, sun and wind were arguing about who was strongest. Ooh, let's now think about what happened in the middle of the story. Let's look and see. Ooh, I'm trying to think about what happened in the middle of the story. But for some reason, I think I got a little fuzzy on what happened. So I'm going to go back in my text and read to see if I can figure out what happened in the middle of the story. Listen closely and see how Miss Finney figures out what happened in the middle. Back and forth argued wind and sun. Then they noticed a traveler walking down the road. "I have an idea," said Wind. "Whichever one of us can make the traveler take off his cloak shall be recognized as the strongest. I will go first." Ooh, that word cloak, that's the traveler's jacket. Can you guys say cloak? Yeah. Can you spell it with me too? Ready? C-L-O-A-K. Cloak. That's, again, a jacket that you wear. So in case you're like, wait, what was a cloak? They wanted the traveler to take his cloak off? That means they wanted him to take off his jacket. Well, because I went back in the text, I think I know what happened in the middle. I know that they were still arguing, the wind and the sun were arguing about who was strongest. But in our text, it also said that they had an idea, or Wind had an idea. It said that whoever could get the traveler to take off his cloak would be named the strongest. So I know that in the middle of the story, the wind and the sun came up with an idea to see who was the strongest. And that idea that they came up with was to see who could get the traveler to take his cloak off. Okay, friends, let's get into our last part. Now it's going to be your turn to think about what happened at the end of the story. All right, let's take a look. Whew, first grade. Before you guys think about what happened at the end of the story, I want to see if you guys can handle a challenge. Are you ready for a challenge? Okay, your challenge is to find the word cloak in the text and write it on your paper. This is a great time to pause the video so you can find that word cloak. Once you have it, hit that play button. Did you find the word cloak? I'm sure you did, and I'm sure it's written on your paper right now. Okay, friends, now it's going to be your turn. I went over what happened at the beginning of the story and the middle of the story. Now it's your turn to listen closely to see what happens at the end of the story. I'm going to read the text for you just in case you guys forgot for some reason. So I'm going to read back in that text because strong readers always go back in the text whenever they're talking about what happened in the story. So think to yourself, what happened in the end of the story? If you know what happened at the end, keep it in your brain because you're going to use it for your writing today. Okay, let me read the story. Listening ears on? The traveler opened his cloak. Still, the sun shone. Stronger and stronger, the traveler grew hotter and hotter and hotter. After a few more steps, the traveler loosened his cloak. Then he tore off his cloak and dropped it on the road. "You win," said Wind. "I am sorry I was so boastful." Okay, first grade, I want you to take the time to think right now what happened at the end of the story. Okay, keep it in your brain because we're going to use that end of the story to help us with our writing today. Okay, first graders, do you still have what happened at the end of the story in your mind? I'm glad you do. If not, you can always rewind that video and listen to me read again. Today, you guys are going to be writing about the final event in the story. So you're going to write one complete sentence, or you could do two. If you think you're done, you've just begun. You can write a sentence, or more than one sentence, explaining what happened at the end of the story. I put a sentence stem up here that you guys can use to help you to get started with your sentence. It says, in the end, in that space, you all will write down what happened at the end of the story. In the end, Miss Candaris and Miss Finney did jumping jacks. Is that what happened at the end of the story? No. You all need to figure out what happened at the end of the story and write it down. All right, first grade, you all did such an amazing job today talking about the beginning, middle, and end of a story. When you are all finished with all of your work for the day, make sure you send it to your teacher, so either myself, Miss Finney, or Miss Kelly. Also, friends, don't forget to send it to your teacher on Seesaw, Remind, or through email. And also, don't forget, make sure you guys are putting in your attendance and you are watching your specials, videos, and activities. All right, first grade, I'll see you next time. Bye, friends.